Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the latest in our series of Zoom meetings. Now, the meeting tonight will be following the travelling career of John and Susi Richardson. I first met John and Susi in 2003. We'd organised a medical history tour to Italy, and it was led by the surgeon Harold Ellis, and John and Susi were booked on. Halfway through the tour, Harold had to go back to the UK, so John and Susi, along with GP and medical historian Dr. John Ford, took over the running of the tour and did an excellent job. The following year, we ran a medical history cruise in the Mediterranean, and again, John was one of the speakers on the cruise. In 2006, we started our own company, and John and Susi were very supportive from the outset with lots of help and advice and connections. They've been leading tours and cruises for me ever since, and you'll be hearing about the tours and cruises and the expeditions that they have been on. The thing about John and Susi is whenever there is a situation, and those of you who travel know that sometimes there will be a situation, they deal with it well, professionally, and with excellent humour. And a few of the tours that sprung to mind where we had sort of situations when I was thinking about this message were the changing of a hotel in Libya at the last moment. John kept the group entertained, Susi changed the hotel. A very long border crossing between Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan. And then recently, last March, we had a 2-week cruise that turned into a 3-week cruise. Now, I'm sure you'll be hearing about these episodes and many others, including the expeditions that they have been on as well. And I am very much looking forward to hearing their talk as well. So at this point, I'd like to say, enjoy the talk, and thank you, John and Susi, over to you.
When John and Emma suggested that we do a talk, we had no idea about the complexity of the task that we'd been set. Our respect for teachers using Zoom has increased enormously. Standing in front of your audience with a clicker in hand, presentation on the screen, crib notes in front of you, normal. This evening is like presenting from the front of a bus, facing forward, using the microphone and not being able to see the passengers behind you. There are 2 of us presenting. You can see us, but we cannot see you. I think radio presenters have it easy. So please stay with us, and we will try and live up to John Bain's words about keeping calm in a crisis.
Welcome to a celebration of travel. Travel means different things to different people. To Mark Twain, travel broadens the mind. Mark Twain wrote, "Broad, wholesome, charitable views of men and things cannot be acquired by vegetating in one little corner of the earth all one's lifetime." Sorry, it's not very clear. After some time spent pondering on our interpretation of what travel means to us.
This is a summary of our travel over the last 54 years. 8 expeditions, 40 tours with 24 different countries with the Royal British Legion, 11 other tours, including medical battlefield tours, 7 tours when John Baines was at Master Travel, 29 tours as leaders, lecturers, or simply as tourists with John Baines tours, 8 sailing expeditions with undergraduates, mainly in the West Indies, 2 long overseas locums in Nepal and Brunei, and 6 shorter locums in Cyprus, Nepal, and Brunei. Living and working in Germany, Cyprus, and Hong Kong opened our world for travel with young children. We've also been on significant family history journeys to India, Australia, and Western Samoa. This is you. No, I think there's someone.
Sorry, I've got confused. I think this summary explains the problem that we have in choosing which bits to remember tonight. When we travel together, I'm able to do the photography and the writing, and that brings the journey to life. Exactly 365 days ago, we were repatriated from the Braemar in the Caribbean. Our travel stopped. Tonight, we will celebrate our memories gained through traveling over the years.
Now listen in. the hat of authority and the badge of office. Repeating my normal mantra, we are showing you the menu, and it's up to you to say, I have seen that or done that now, or I'd like to learn more, and perhaps come back again, either on another John Baines tour or as an independent traveller. I personally dislike seeing tour guides with umbrellas, flags, or numbered discs. I always wear a Panama hat so that my party knows where I am, and if anyone is being pestered by anybody, they can refer them to me, and I will sort it out. That's what I do. The badge of office is very useful, as it allows me to bargain by saying in shops and hotels, do you want me to bring more tours to you in future? This old KLM crew case has been used as my traveling doctor's bag for many years. Although I'm now completely retired from clinical medicine, it remains in the cellar.
Having been shown the way by our families on a strictly imposed post-war government foreign travel budget of £50 a head, the time came for us to want to go and face challenges on our own. Freedom of travel came to us both at 17.
In 1960, I started traveling independently, but not alone. I was marooned on 2 uninhabited Scottish islands in the Inner Hebrides, doing ecological surveys and reporting to the Natural History Museum. Also, I walked across northern Spain with Humphrey Mather, following the route of the retreat of Sir John Moore to Corunna in 1808. Humphrey paid the last post over General Moore's grave on the ramparts, and that turned out some very surprised Garda Civil from their guard room in the barracks next door. We just fled.
My independent travelling began in March 1963. At 17, my father paid for a ticket to New York. Just out of school, with 2 Beatles long-playing records, unreleased in the USA, an English accent, and a wish to travel, I accepted. I was based with my 17-year-old exchanges family in New York, a city where Harlem was on permanent lockdown, and I was given my freedom. Looking back now, I don't know how I managed to stay safe on this 3-month trip. Total innocence was bliss. There are many stories here for another day. My father planned my return by enrolling me into nursing at Barts, starting in May 1965. I had no complaints, living in London with accommodation, friends in London, and I was paid. Nursing was 4 hard years in London in the 60s. There were exams to navigate, but I was given a training that has opened doors to me all over the world. I also met John when I was 19 and married him by 21. My parents said, now I was somebody else's responsibility.
The Cambridge Medico-Sociological expedition to India in 1964 was overland, with 2 Land Rovers travelling from Cambridge to South India. There was a team of 8 from different colleges and with a variety of skills. This expedition is where my snake stories and many others come from. Many of you who have travelled with us will have heard my snake stories, and those who have not travelled with us yet have got to experience that experience to look forward to. Here's the team in 1964 with our 2 Land Rovers, and the team again in the year 2000 when we had a reunion picnic.
In 1967, a trained doctor and a nearly trained nurse. Before I had completed my 3rd year at Barts, we were engaged. In 1968, we were married. The next 20 years traveling became a joint venture. And from 1973, it became a family venture. In 1972, it was the British Transamericas expedition. We were the medical part of a 4-month expedition to Panama and Colombia with 54 soldiers and adventurers. John Blashford Snell was leading an attack on the Isthmus of Panama to show the need for a road connecting North and South America. The Scientific Exploration Society backed the expedition and enabled young people to pit their wits against the jungle with 2 Range Rovers. John and I were the medical team, backed up by the American and Panamanian military, both keen to help us and to have the chance themselves to rescue casualties from the jungle. We gave them opportunities. But that's another story. Expeditions with rovers go together. We really tested these.
On the left, you can see the man with the hat. The stone plinth is Palo de las Letras, marking the border between Panama and Colombia. I was treating a patient in the top picture who had got myiasis of the right shoulder, and Susi was doing hearts and minds in the picture below.
This is a nice relaxed picture, and it's happiness 49 years ago.
Just after we came out of the jungle. We were there for 100 days, and we did 2.5 miles a day in those 100 days, 2.5 miles a day, 250 miles of jungle and swamp.
In 1976, it was the Tana River expedition. By 1976, we had 2 children, 3 years old and 18 months old. We decided that they were old enough to travel properly. In 1976, the Tana River expedition was going to Kenya to study the ecology down the river from Mount Kenya to the mouth of the Tana River in the Indian Ocean. It included making the first descent of the Kora Rapids. John and I established the importance of our being part of this expedition, run by Nigel Windsor and some of his fellow young scientists. And having established that our presence was essential for the logistic and medical side of the adventure, we then introduced the fact that we seemed to have failed to inform them that Claire and Kate needed to come with us. A team of about 16 young soldiers and scientists and 2 children spent 4 months taking scientific readings along the river, documenting and looking at the flora and fauna, and recording the details to be used for future reference at the National Museums of Kenya. With 2 small children, this was an interesting time, but that is another story. We realized to continue traveling with a young family, it was easier if we volunteered for postings in different continents. In 1977 to 79, living in Germany, visiting the Netherlands, Italy, Greece, France, Monaco, Luxembourg, Belgium in our camper van. In 1979 to 82, living in Cyprus, traveling to Egypt, Jordan, Israel, Crete, and Rhodes. And in 1982 to 84, living in Hong Kong, traveling to Taiwan, Japan, China, Singapore, and Malaysia. In 1984 to 88, we came back to Germany again. And in 1993 to 95, we went to Northern Ireland. Sorry, I forgot to give you that slide. Anyway, I read it out, so we'll go on. Our association with the British Legion gave us travel, and we gave it expertise. John was the organizer and medical escort with 40 pilgrimages to 24 countries in 21 years between 1991 and 2012.
In 1991, I became a doctor for the Royal British Legion War Graves Pilgrimage Department. After the Falkland conflict, bodies of dead service personnel were allowed to be repatriated, something that had not been allowed before. War widows from previous wars lobbied Parliament, and in 1984, the government set up a scheme where war widows could visit their loved one's grave abroad. The Royal British Legion was tasked with running it. My dictionary defines a pilgrimage as a voyage or journey to a sacred place. To a widow, her husband's grave is a sacred place. The widows were taken to the graves, which was an emotional experience, and then the history of that particular campaign was explained to them, and then sightseeing would commence. These were sad journeys, but they were also happy occasions when a psychological burden had been laid to rest and a holiday commenced and friendships were made. These pilgrimages were quite different from a battlefield tour when the campaign and the study and the battlefield would be studied and visited, and then one or more cemeteries would be visited. Susi?
I was able to travel in a nursing role on large or particularly difficult pilgrimages, like Tambuziat in South Burma in 1999. Being able to say farewell to a loved one was one of the things that some widows wanted to do more than anything in the world. They found the emotional and physical stamina needed to travel, and seeing a grave can be the start of believing that someone is dead, even years after the event. This traveling was an extraordinarily emotional and very fulfilling. We made contact with people at a pivotal moment in their lives, supporting them and then celebrating with them. The pilgrimages stopped when those wishing to travel became too old or infirm. We learnt so much from them. And on the slide are all the pilgrimages we made worldwide.
The Royal British Legion pilgrimages started in 1985 for war widows. In 2009, Helping Heroes Return program was launched to let more than 50,000 veterans at public expense travel and make commemorative trips to where they served in World War II or post-war Malaya, Borneo, Aden, Cyprus, and Korea. That was a very, very busy time for us.
Our move in 1988 from Germany after 11 years abroad was welcome. And our traveling changed, did not stop. This heralded the beginning of a new way of working and traveling. John had a full-time job and was doing 2 MSCs, one in general practice and another in occupational medicine. But the chance of just one more expedition with 8 Land Rovers was irresistible.
So this is the Cambridge to Cape Town trip that we did in 2000, Exercise Deja Blue. The expedition took us to Africa with undergraduates who were in the Cambridge University Officers Training Corps. The purpose of the expedition was to celebrate the centenary of when the CUOTC sent a platoon of undergraduates to serve in the Second Anglo-Boer War in 1900. It was a 2-legged expedition in 8 Land Rovers, and we were involved in the Kenya to Cape Town leg. I was the doctor and Susi joined us in South Africa, but that is another story. You?
Traveling and tour guiding was emerging into a third career. And medical knowledge, with leadership, organizational skills, and medical knowledge as a bonus. The opportunity to enjoy our love of history of medicine and travel led to our association with John Baines. In 2002, John, age 60, was ready to take on the world. He was still in the military and had reached the expected military retirement age. Retirement was not a concept accepted by John. Working differently is. So he continued to work as a doctor, but we included much more traveling. 2002, the family had grown up. The Silver Salver had been received and the job done. A full career, an emeritus professorship to take with him, a family content with their lot, and a Silver Salver to remind us of friends made in the military. it was a time to move on. There just happened to be an opening coming up for more travelling.
This is a long locum in Nepal. Hang on, I think in this picture there's David Forsyth lolling in the background. Anyway, any opportunity to travel and work was enthusiastically taken. Master travel had something new to show us.
Life and Travel with John Baines. For 5 years, between 2002 and 2007, we travelled the world for John Baines at Master Travel in Europe, India, the Middle East, China, and America. We also visited Hong Kong, Australia, Western Samoa, and USA as holidays, and were part of 19 Royal British Legion pilgrimages around the world. In 2007, John Baines started working with his own company, John Baines Tours. We happily became part of his travelling team. We have made 15 visits to India, and the dates of those are all on the slide. Over 57 years, we've had the chance to see India through the eyes that just looked at its everyday beauty and enjoyed the colours and the completely different culture. There was something that pulled us back time after time to travel and to see more. We hope by showing you a selection of random pictures taken in recent years, you will see something of the India we love. In 2010, we took an amazing group of people across the south of the subcontinent, and the country did not let us down. The tour was a memorable one, and it incorporated a number of medical visits that gave us a whole new perspective on life in India.
My delight on this tour was being able to return to the Christian Medical Centre and Leprosarium at Karagiri near Vellore, where I had done research on inherited factors in leprosy in 1964 with Daryl Tant, who is watching this presentation, just after leaving Cambridge. What was even more interesting was to see that it is still a vibrant place and treating people with leprosy.
This is where we're going to let the photographs tell the story. A picture is worth 1,000 words. This is a quote that's attributed to Henrik Ibsen.
These are the Chinese fishing nets at Cochin.
The colours of India are just extraordinary.
Those are the rice boats on the back waters, and we've spent a couple of happy days on a couple of tours on those rice boats.
And overnight.
Oh, and overnight.
This is the streets of Calcutta, where the water is there for washing, but there's still a lot of people who are washing on the streets. They certainly don't seem to be doing social distancing, but look again at the colours. This is probably my favourite picture. It doesn't show perhaps its best in a small size, but it is of a Jain temple, which I was taking for the pillars, when as I clicked the camera coming round, this man just turned the corner and came into view. And again, the colours of India. And this is us. That's a pretty contented pair. with the hat, authority, and I have troubled ankles, and I obviously had troubled ankles on that trip. And those are the Chinese fishing nets in Kuching as the sun goes down.
We've made 6 visits to Burma. I've been traveling regularly to Burma since 1993. John Baines had been reluctant to visit there since our then Prime Minister told people to boycott it. But the French, the Germans, and the Italians were visiting it, but not in large numbers. The Royal British Legion had a policy of avoiding government-owned transport and hotels and dealing directly with local suppliers. In 2011, John Baines agreed for me to lead tours there, and I could implement what I'd learnt from previous tours. On one Royal British Legion tour, I was up in the Arakan and I learnt a very important lesson. One of my pilgrims wanted to visit an orphanage, and I was called there by her to see 2 sick children. All the children, I dealt with the 2 sick children, all the other children were malnourished, but the pagoda was covered in new gold leaf. I gave the carer enough money to get an egg and a glass of reconstituted evaporated milk to all the children every day for a couple of months. Another of the pilgrims had brought out from England some pencils to give to children. It was thought that this would be a good place to leave them. The pencils were made in China. The hard woods of Burma are being cut down and exported to China, made into pencils, exported to the UK, and brought back out to Burma by a UK traveller, which is probably only a few miles from where the trees were cut down. There were insufficient pencils for all the children, and they had no exercise books. So I went down to Akiab and found an old-fashioned stationery booth, bought enough pencils, rubbers, and exercise books for the whole orphanage. The stallholder was absolutely delighted and said that this transaction was as much as his total last month's income. Thereafter, we decided to purchase materials in the country we're visiting so that stallholders and other suppliers got the benefit as well as the recipients. Yours.
The following photos are from a variety of times that we have been in Burma.
These are little boy monks.
Health and safety laws are not very severe in Burma, and you see there's bamboo scaffolding all around the place.
Coalman. Fishermen.
This is Inia Lake, and these are real fishermen who do catch fish. This is their method, and they are quite the most beautiful thing to see. This isn't a flooded area. This is how they live. They live on the lake, on the Inia Lake. This is Granny sitting.
With the Burmese cheroot.
I don't think this is actually the cooking. This is dyeing material, but very much in a smoky atmosphere.
This little girl is being taken as a sort of, I won't say a christening, but she's going to the monastery in her pink clothes, and she'll spend, so female young monks are in pink and the boys are in these sort of golden brown colors. And this was all the young people going off, the very young people going off to have their period at the monastery.
And this was the parade going up to take the young monk boys and girls up to spend a length of time at the monastery.
And this was in Bagan.
Yeah. This is showing that the young children who don't look more 4 and 5 are out there on the water on their boat.
And those are floating gardens. This is an elephant on a trunk road.
And that's another lovely sunset. Now this one has a story connected to it. It is on our first.
Don't read that.
No,
Don't read
sorry.
that.
These 2 young ladies appeared on consecutive years that John visited the wooden palace outside the fort at Mandalay. Their interest each time was in his hat. This photo shows their alarm at its condition. It's quite extraordinary. The 3rd time he went there, they had obviously grown up and they weren't there, but it was as though they were waiting for us. And we had the most wonderful welcome. And you can see just a lovely relationship. We've been on 5 tours to China. Our first venture into China was in 1982, a 10-day family holiday traveling by train from Hong Kong to Beijing. A long, long train journey with a 10 and 8-year-old. 2 children in China was interesting at the time of the one-child policy. The streets were free of cars and the Chairman Mao suits in blue and green, the normal clothes. We were the only non-Chinese travellers we saw. We travelled on local buses and a great fuss was made of the children. We saw a China rarely seen by tourists. In 2006, we had another adventure in China, not amongst the traffic, but following the new road being constructed across China from Xi'an to Kashgar. An empty, sometimes our old bus travelling on an empty superhighway and sometimes on potholed dirt tracks. That shows the size of our journey, all the way from Beijing to Bishkek, taking a few airplanes, a bit of train, and a lot by bus. And the part by bus was superb. And I'm going to show the pictures again, like before, to give you a feel of it. Right, this must be my trip of a lifetime. We had no idea where we were venturing. The guide, Chung, had never been to the land so far to the west of China before. When we left the Terracotta Warriors in Xi'an, the long journey through to Kashgar started. We were heading for the land of the Uyghurs, the people of Western China who are currently in the news. Every turn was an unexpected adventure. Ladling out the soup in a restaurant in the middle of nowhere, content that it was chicken soup, when many items on offer were unidentifiable, the ladle came up with a fully clawed foot in it, closely followed by the head. I will never forget the look on everybody's faces. 2006 was early in the development of the modern Silk Road. The Muslim Uyghur people were at the west end of China and living seemingly peacefully, in many ways politically separated and following their way of life. They viewed the anticipated road, rail and air links with the east of China as positive. The reality is now a potential disaster for them. There are different spurs off the Silk Road. They were trade and information routes. The route we were taking was following the early stages of the development of a road to get trade out of China to the west via the Indian Ocean, which is weeks quicker than currently done by sea from the east coast of China. The road was astonishing. The views from the bus were of miles and miles of empty landscape. It was like watching a documentary on television. We were traveling along a path of history and became aware of the changes that were going to happen to the isolated people we frequently saw. Our minds could not wander too far as to where we were, or where the nearest garage was, or AA mechanic was. We were truly part of an adventure with 17 mature people in a bus that had seen much better days, and with a national guide who kept getting messages from his worried wife in Beijing.
I'd been very lucky that I'd been sent out by John Baines, courtesy of the Tourist Board of Western China, on a recce for 3 months before. So I'd actually been to most of the places that we went to. So I was very much prepared for what we were going to see. And it really gave me the ability to say to our guide, who was very reluctant to go into the Uyghur houses, it gave me the courage to say, no, we're going to go into the Uyghur houses. Okay, next one.
This is a picture of our intrepid travellers.
We know that Ron is watching this, and Peter Blaker and Hiltegund, his presentation.
And probably some others, but you can tell us in the questions and answers. The Terracotta Warriors with incredible individual facial details. These two pictures are taken 2,000 years apart, but I think the facial resemblance is notable. Each warrior has a different face. The roads were changeable and empty. Sometimes they got really down to dirt paths, and you can see the wonderful notices on this road. You can't actually see a notice, but you came, don't drive too closely or keep your distance. But as you see, there wasn't anybody else on this road very often, when we were there anyway. And I talked about the condition of our vehicle. It was an old one, and this was a crack that started on one side of the windscreen and was slowly moving across as we travelled. Now I'll just let you appreciate just some of the views out the windows.
That's an oasis.
That was an alternative method of travel. And this was market day, with everybody walking to market with their goods. And then we stopped and had a meal, and this was the restaurant. Ethnic, and this is where all Uyghurs, and this is where we sat down to enjoy our chicken soup. Anyone for soup? The children were just wonderful and so colourful and so friendly. We stopped on the side of this lake, and this was some entrepreneurial person who was trying to sell us dresses. And then, as John said, we did go into the Uyghurs' house. This is a meal that was laid out for us to sit round the edge and enjoy and have a copious amount of food. And then along the way, there was a continual looking at this map to see where we were and to try and work out where we were going. And John is bending over and trying to explain to Peter where we are. And that's Chung standing up behind on the right, our guide, who I know many of you will know. Then we got to this picture, which is quite significant because John was at a point of changing his work, and perhaps John's information service and cafe, perhaps this was going to be a new future. Then we come across sea cruises. Sea cruises are an experience taken by different people in different ways. Some passengers come on board and don't leave the boat until the end of the cruise. They're often called frequent flyers, and they get good deals, booking from one cruise to the next. Our group are of like-minded people within the larger ship who are keen to learn, visit places, and enjoy a varied academic input and discussions. The joy of travelling miles in your sleep and arriving rested and well-fed for another day of exploration without the need to challenge yourself has definite pluses. But I do not find that the fleeting visits on shore give any real sense of the place and its people, and I enjoy spending time standing and staring on land. Cruises with the theme of history of medicine have been central to us, and the purpose for landing is to learn more about the place that we have attended a talk on before disembarking. In 2004, History of Medicine cruise in the Mediterranean stands out for me. It was the first one we did. It was with Master Travel. 16 years later, there's no obvious brochure remaining, but it was without doubt the star of sea cruises for me. It was the first, and the medical lectures and visits to medically significant places were outstanding. The first time of doing something and going somewhere is often the most memorable. So that's the only bit of brochure that I got left of the 2004 History of Medicine cruise to the Mediterranean, and that is ourselves on it. That is the whole team. It was a large team. John had sampled the experience of escorted travel. I'll give you that back in case you're looking for yourself on it. John has sampled the experience of escorted travel, but he was very soon discovering that sitting back and waiting for it to happen was hard for him. He struggled to keep quiet and out of the organising role. And as things turned out, his skills were called upon when one of the leaders had to return to UK unexpectedly. As we heard from John in the beginning, he was referring to this early tour. He was then given the microphone, and the rest is history. Now we'll see just a few photos. That was the boat, it was the Marco Polo. And life on the ocean waves certainly seemed to appeal to us. Next, we come to Indian river cruises. We have done 2 Indian river cruises, and they are quite something different. The small boat, almost entirely filled with our travellers, is taken very slowly up the river, and we are shown India in a way that hasn't changed in years. It is the most wonderful experience, and I would do it again at the drop of a hat. The cruises were with the same captain and company, and the things we saw were just unexpected and unspoilt. The 2 river cruises were seeing life on the banks of the Hooghly River and the Brahmaputra River. This is the route from Calcutta, following history along the River Hooghly.
We came back by train.
We did. That's what that big red mark is. While we were doing our time in India, we had an insight into part of our British history that's not taught at school. It was not until after our tour in 2006 that I became aware of my family history connections with British India. We discovered while travelling along the Silk Road with Peter Blecker that part of my family had been continually resident in India from 1767 until 1917. It became time to investigate another aspect of India. Calcutta was a starting of the Shakespeare family history in India. at the altar of this church in Calcutta, St. John's Church, there were many family weddings in the early 1800s. To be able to stand exactly where my ancestors stood in a country far away from home, but in a place that I have felt instantly at ease, is part of the family history travel that we've done. And we had weddings at this church in 1803, 1806, 1810, and 1812. And these are, particularly Henry Davenport, Shakespeare at the end, are my direct ancestors. Now we will have a series of photographs that were taken over the recent years while in India. That one I just think is fantastic.
Semi-detached.
Semi-detached and part owned by more than one person, I think. This is part of the early morning walk that we do from the Oberoi Hotel in Calcutta, when you see the city waking up and the market available.
Fish.
And the cows, of course, are always in the street. We've had them before, as John tells me. Hey, get around these ones. Those ladies were all sitting there looking very nervous because their children were all having in school, getting their school exam results. And it was a custom for the mothers to sit outside to wait and hear the results. Along the banks of the Hooghly, we saw all sorts of places where these handmade things were being made literally outside the houses of the people who were the artisans. That is the Hooghly River. The weather isn't that good, but it's a vibrant place. This is down by Plassey, a happy group of people and their colours. That's what you see as you go down on the boat and you see on the sides of the river. That's where they live. And that's where we went into these villages as well. We had the ability to go on land from the boat. The boat could tie up at anywhere virtually and get off. And this is a Wrigley tin made fishing vessel. For this, it just takes the one person, and there's no other traffic on the Hooghly, so they can just go across with one paddle and out and do their fishing. Everything goes on these boats as they make their way across the river. And this is a beautiful, beautiful scarf. And I bought one of these, and it's absolutely amazing. I paid £25 for it. It is a beautiful scarf. But to think that he's doing every individual little bit there. And it was up on, another one was up on the loom. Their children were just wonderful. That is just one slide from the Brahmaputra. That was a different trip. It was a different sides of the river. And then again, we have another sunset. These are 11 brochures from tours that were not in India, Burma, or China. And all the tours that I have not mentioned were just as wonderful, but there just is not enough time to look at everything. We're grateful for the challenge of producing this celebration Zoom and giving us the incentive to sort through the files and boxes. Let's have one last look at our last moments of travel. The last moments of travel for 2020 before being repatriated from Cuba. And the people underneath, of which I know there are a few tonight, we spent quite a long time discussing what the future had in mind, and I don't think any of us had any idea of what we've had to live through in the last year. The map above is just wonderful, but we did not get to most of the places. And the boat on the right is the good old Braemar. That, as we looked out from the boat and saw nothing as we were waiting for somebody to kindly reclaim us and be allowed to bring out British Airways aeroplanes to eventually Cuba, were prepared to let the boat dock and for us to get off, because we did have people suffering from the COVID virus on the boat. And so we were flying a yellow flag like
Quarantine, the
Quarantine.
Yellow Jack.
The Yellow Jack, and people were not very keen to come near us. This solitary booby was just sort of checking us out.
Yep, I'm still tour guiding, hat and badge are ready. That's the end, but we thought you might like to see what's coming up next. We have 3 tours being arranged. Here is a taster for the future tours we will be leading. The first tour is to return to Northern Ireland in July, and I will be delighted to go back to that beautiful land. And thank goodness it's now peaceful. The second tour, we're off to Shetland and Orkney in September. As I said at the beginning, I started my independent travel on 2 Scottish islands, and now 60 years later, we're going back to 2 different Scottish islands. And finally, tour 3 is a sea cruise to the Azores and will include a visit to Corunna at the end of October. It will be déjà vu for me, but from a rather different angle and without a last post from the rampart. And before I say goodbye from both of us and carry on, I'd just like to thank Susi for 2 weeks hard work putting this presentation together and doing a lot of the writing and coping with looking after me as well.
And the technology.
And the technology.
It's been a pleasure, John, and I hope you've all enjoyed it.